So I've recently been watching Hunter x Hunter for the first time, and I realized about halfway through the Chimera Ant arc that all of my favorite characters are the villains. Other than Kurapika and Killua, everyone else at the top of my list is Phaeton, Chrollo, Hisoka, Illumi, and Meruem. They're all villains who have committed horrendous acts against others, like, murder, but they're also some of the most beloved characters in the fandom. Almost every Hunter x Hunter fan that I know simps over Hisoka, who's literally a disgusting homicidal maniac child predator that gets pleasure from killing people. So it got me thinking about all villains in general and what about them is so intriguing. I would never actually want to meet anyone like Hisoka in real life, so then why is his character so loved? Why do evil people fascinate us? Why do we like villains? Well, we can start with the easy answer and say that it comes down to the plot and writing. A well-written villain moves the story along because they're oftentimes the motivation for the protagonist. They give the story a purpose, an obstacle that needs to be overcome. In a story with a hero versus a villain, the villain is what offsets the hero. They balance each other out. It's hard to have one without the other. You can't hear Luke Skywalker without also hearing Darth Vader. You can't hear Spider-Man without the Green Goblin or Venom. One of my favorite movies of all time is The Dark Knight, and I would argue that this movie is equally about the Joker as it is the Batman. A well-written villain is as compelling, if not more compelling, than the hero of a story. The Joker lives to create chaos, and Batman is bound by honor to clean it up. It's exactly like the Joker said, they need each other. In some cases, the story is written in a way where we can empathize with the villain. A villain that we can understand is much more convincing than someone who is evil just for no reason. And that's because people aren't usually all good or all bad. If we continue with the Joker example, let's take a look at Joaquin Phoenix's portrayal in the 2019 Joker movie. We obviously know who Arthur turns out to be, but this movie does an amazing job of showing his descent into madness. They created a realistic portrayal of undiagnosed and untreated mental illness and how it can affect people in the worst way possible. There are real people who've experienced the exact same things as Arthur, which makes it much easier to empathize with him and even makes you root for him a little bit. All it takes is one bad day for someone to become the Joker. Of course, his mental health doesn't really excuse murder, but his life gives us insight into why he turned out the way that he did. Each character has a motive behind their actions, villain or otherwise. Knowing a person's motivation will always make it easier to empathize with them. If someone cuts you off at a stoplight, the initial reaction would be to get angry and honk the horn, but after thinking about it for a bit, you might wonder if maybe they were rushing someone to the hospital or something like that. Again, it doesn't actually excuse them for creating more danger, but it's harder to be angry at someone if you can understand their reasoning. Most villains have a purpose that drives their actions, whether that's vengeance, power, money, desperation, or anything else. They usually have a reason for being a villain. Sometimes we can understand where they're coming from and actually relate to their stories. Many villains are actually just normal people who have been hurt or misguided. To quote Harvey Dent, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. It was unfortunate to see Gotham's White Knight become Two-Face after losing the person he loved most in the world. Looking at another person who's been burned, Zuko, who had been abused by his father and stripped of his titles, believed that the only solution to his problem is to capture the Avatar. All he wanted was to restore his honor so that he could go back to his home and his family. If we didn't know anything about Zuko's backstory, we wouldn't understand his burning need to capture the Avatar, and we would probably continue to dislike him. But knowing that he himself was a victim of the Fire Lord helps us empathize with him. Some characters even see themselves as the hero of the story. The MCU Thanos, for example, wanted the universe to be a better place, but he thought the only way to achieve that goal was to kill half of all living things. He didn't want to see more worlds die out from overpopulation and lack of resources like they did on his home planet. The goal to save people from going hungry and dying actually makes a lot of sense, but his method is simply unethical. We can understand where he's coming from based on his story, but killing half of all life is quite evil. In his mind, however, he believes that he's righteous because he's the only one willing to make the sacrifice for the greater good, and that's his motivation. In certain cases, we may even relate to the villain more than the hero. Most of the time, heroes are held to a much higher moral standard than anyone else, including average people. Characters like Captain America and Superman are the epitome of lawful good. They have such a strong moral code that most real people could never attain. Even anti-heroes like Wolverine are still bound by morals, whereas villains are not. We expect heroes to act decently, but we don't hold villains to the same code. Villains are unpredictable and can do basically whatever they want because they lack basic goodness and honor. They're easily able to throw away their humanity or don't really have it to begin with. Normally, people are not innately good or bad. We're born a clean slate, and our environment is what shapes our principles as we grow. We get in trouble as a kid when we throw a tantrum or hurt our siblings, so we learn what kind of behavior is acceptable and what is not. Villains, however, are not held back by morals or societal influences. They don't really care about the consequences of their actions, which gives them the freedom to do exactly what they want, and this freedom can be very appealing. Most people are not lawful good. We get angry, we get frustrated, jealous, and sometimes we want to get revenge on the people who have wronged us. Sometimes we want to inflict pain on the people who have hurt us, but we don't because of our moral code. We relate to villains because they represent the darkest parts of ourselves, parts that we may be uncomfortable with. Villains are the embodiment of everything that we push down within ourselves and never actually say out loud. Now, I'm absolutely not saying that we all secretly want to become serial killers, but in most people, there is a part of us that doesn't always want to take the high road. If we get into an argument with a friend, sometimes we just want to scream at them as loud as we can or even throw a punch or two. Personally, I've always thought it would be kind of fun to shatter a wine bottle and then use the neck as a weapon, but who actually does that? I'm the type of person who traps spiders in cups and then releases them back outdoors. I could never actually do something so violent like that. In fact, if I ever did that, I would probably shatter the bottle on my own hand and end up in the hospital. The point is, we've all thought about things like that, but our humanity, our morals, and our better judgment is what prevents us from actually acting upon them. Even if we do end up snapping at a friend, most people feel bad and apologize at some point afterwards. It makes me wonder what would happen if something like the Purge was real. Would normally decent people actually commit murder? But that's something that a villain doesn't care about since their morals are a lot more vague. Hisoka, for example, doesn't hold himself to any moral standard whatsoever. His biggest reason for killing people is simply because it gives him pleasure. The only thing he actually cares about is having a good fight, and that's all there is to it. He's manipulative and will go to extreme measures to get what he wants. Hisoka has been known to betray and lie to his comrades if it benefits him. On the contrary, he's even helped the people who should be his enemies if it'll get him closer to a fight. He sees the world as one big giant game, and the people are his toys. Hisoka is unpredictable because his actions are solely based on whatever he feels like in that moment. Everything he does is for entertainment. He is literally the definition of chaotic neutral. His motive is simple, but that's what makes him such an interesting character. We don't really know anything about his past, and his only redeeming quality is that his waist is snatched, so we don't really have much to empathize with. All that's left is this manipulative, deceitful, bloodthirsty clown. He's a game master, and the world is his puppet, and it's simply fun to watch. It's fun to see someone so off the walls given to every single urge he has. His games are entertaining. So, we have villains that make the story interesting, villains that we can empathize with, villains that we see our shadow selves in, but what about the villains that we absolutely hate? Why are we drawn to people who are just pure evil? I'm talking Cersei Lannister, Michael Myers, Hannibal Lecter type of evil. Joffrey Baratheon, for example, is a horribly wicked character. With a mother like Cersei and the interesting genes that he has, it's not hard to see how he became such a terrible person. He hurts and kills people for the sake of hurting and killing them. It's almost like a sport to him. He's too weak to actually do anything substantial, so he preys on people even weaker than him. People with no power. He has the authority as king to do whatever hateful things he wants to do without any sort of repercussions. His family treats him a lot more like an irritating child than a murderous king. He's easily one of the most hated characters in Game of Thrones, and yet he has our undivided attention every time he comes on screen. Humans by nature are very curious creatures. We're drawn to the macabre even if we don't want to be. It's so far from our own morals and daily lives that we're fascinated by it. It's the same reason why we slow down to see the aftermath of a car accident or stop to watch a burning building. If someone gets in a fight at school, everyone pulls out their phones to record it. It piques our curiosity because it's so out of the normal routine that we're used to. It's not exactly that we want to watch Ramsay Bolton rip the fingernails off of his poor victims, but it's that we simply can't look away. It's so horrifying that you want to cover your eyes, but you end up looking between the cracks in your hands anyways. Joffrey is a power-hungry, indulged boy king who loves to torture and play with his victims, but when it comes down to it, he's a coward. Ramsay, on the other hand, is ruthless, brutal, and will get things done by any means. He's scary, sadistic, and plans horrifying ways to create as much pain as he possibly can. Not only does he enjoy physically hurting people, but he's also incredibly smart and manipulative. He mentally breaks his victims in addition to physically breaking them. When Ramsay is on the screen, I get viscerally scared. Literally, hands sweating, body tense, on the edge of my seat kind of scared. He instills real fear in people, yet he's not actually real. It's not like we're the ones being tortured. We're just watching it comfortably from the couch. From a psychological perspective, our brains analyze negative experiences like this to see if it's an actual threat. Watching a villain be cruel on a movie screen gives our brains the ability to confront our fears without actually being in danger. It gives us the opportunity to evaluate how we would react in these situations from the comfort of our living room. We want to be in control so that our brains can evaluate this data, but we don't actually want to put our lives at risk. And villains give us the perfect chance to be afraid without actually needing to be afraid. So when it comes down to it, I've concluded that there are 4 main reasons why we like villains. They move the story along, we can empathize with them, we see the worst of ourselves in them, and we're just plain curious. Maybe there doesn't really have to be a reason other than pure entertainment, but I wanted to dig a little deeper. Anyways, let me know what you guys think and comment down below who your favorite villain is.
If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention.